Let's get started. So, Anthony, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good. Good to be here. All things considered, super grateful.
Awesome. Yeah, and so for those listening, this is the Successful Archi Students podcast, episode 30. And Anthony, I can't tell you how much of an absolute honor it is to be here with you today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So to get started, would you mind telling us or giving us a quick introduction about yourself and telling us who you are and walk us through the journey you've been to get to where you are today in the world of architecture?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you the quick version, and then we can decide where you might want to go deeper. My name is Anthony Laney. I'm a licensed architect. I've got an architecture firm here in California. It's 12 architects and designers. We are a 6-year-old company. I launched the practice 5 years out of my undergraduate experience. So went to architecture school as a young person. That's where I actually met my wife. She was my classmate in architecture school. 5 years later, we graduated. Soon after that, we got our license. And 5 years after graduated, we decided to quit our wonderful jobs and launch a practice. And so the two of us sat next to each other here in our garage and started doing little projects, mostly backyard designs and renovations for residential clients. I live in a beach suburb south of Los Angeles in California. Over the past 6 years, we've steadily grown, and now it's really fun to have what feels like more of a proper studio where we've got a space filled with computers and wonderful designers, and it's part of my job that I really enjoy. And of course, now we're sitting here week 4 into this safer at home coronavirus response. And it's a different world. I really think there are many things that are going to be changed forever now. And so as a firm leader, part of my job is to design the best architecture I can. And part of it is to position my company to be as strong as possible. And so that's a little bit of our journey. It's a little bit about what's on my mind, and I'm happy to dive in wherever you want.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I do want to kind of dig into a bit more about Laney LA because the story behind it is quite humbling, really. Could you tell us a bit more about Laney LA and how many of you are there? What kind of projects do you work on?
Okay, yes. So right now we're a staff of I think 12. Our focus is high-end residential architecture. And so our most common project, we have 34 active projects. Our most common project would be a driven, successful, often philanthropic husband and wife. A family will interview us. They'll interview a lot of other architects, and they'll ultimately hire us to design their dream home. Most of our homes are right on the coast of California, right on the ocean. And so that means views are important. Obviously, function for the family's lifestyle is very important, but we also have our own personal agenda that we believe that architecture should help lift the community in many ways. And so most of our projects are residential. A handful of them are also commercial. So we're trying to build our commercial division. Our little slogan is high tech and high touch. And so I think that clients will not hire us if they're looking for a team with the most experience and the deepest portfolio. They will hire our competitors if that's what they're looking for. But if they're looking for a team that really leverages and even maximizes, in some ways, technology, BIM technology, to create an absolutely visual and delightful client journey, who are passionate about design, we can bring a very strong value proposition to that client. So that tends to be where we focus. We're a young team. Most of our architects and designers are in their 20s and 30s. In fact, all of them are. Yeah, it's just that I think that flavors kind of the impression that we give and the way we tell our story and the types of clients that are attracted to us.
Yeah, and I love that you guys are all, it's a really young firm. I've seen the team behind Laney LA, and yeah, it's a really young team. And the main audience, I guess, of Successful Archi Student are these architecture students who look up to and admire architects like yourself who have been through the shit, really, and made it out on top. So the aim today, I guess, is to try and find out those key things that got you from architecture student to not just the successful architect you are today, but also the successful entrepreneur and the team leader you've become. And so I want to start off this conversation by talking about hustle and balancing hustle with downtime, because I've seen the kind of projects and the hustle you guys put in at Laney LA. but I've also seen you guys playing ping pong and surfing, and it looks like a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
And this kind of ties back to how you've built up this amazing team culture at Laney LA, but I guess I'm becoming a bit off topic there. I think architecture students tend to get carried away with architecture, like with their work.
Yeah.
And the weeks leading up to deadlines, it's not really easy for architecture students, as you'd obviously be able to remember. Except as a business owner, when you're paying your employees to play ping pong, it kind of says something about how much you value playing. So I just want to talk about why you think it's important to balance work and playing, and if you have any tips for students to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it is, it's partially selfless and it's partially selfish that I operate my business the way that I do. I do think that creativity and anxiety do not go together. I really think there is a negative association there. And so we are sometimes by nature in high stress environments. There are deadlines, there are clients with, who could squash us in a heartbeat because of their net worth. And so it's a high stake game that we're playing. And I just love ping pong because it requires so much focus that I literally am unable to think about the thing I was worrying about 5 minutes ago. And so if I want to get the best out of my designers, I need them to not be overwhelmed. I need them to come up for air and have the right balance between focus and investment and freedom and play. There's been plenty of studies that show that creativity is best when the mind feels free and curious and can wander. And I think breaks are important to that. Daniel Pink wrote a book called When, W-H-E-N, that really kind of looked at the way that we have cycles throughout the day and when's the best time to do head down, headphone on work and when's the best time to be creative. And so I want to pay attention to that. I think that most commonly architecture students they cram as much work as they can into a fixed period of time. I actually think that is a very, very valuable skill set, but it doesn't stop at like how much can you cram into a week. We track every minute of our time so that we can retroactively analyze it. And that's something that most architecture students do not do. They just lump it all into the bucket of get as much done as you can. I am radically focused on time management, but I don't think that comes at the expense of creativity. So while I think that creativity and anxiety are absolute enemies, I think that creativity and discipline sometimes look like opposites, but actually support one another. And so I'm a big proponent of like planning your day. That doesn't mean I'm saying you only have 10 minutes to play ping pong, but it does mean that I'm saying, look, I'm going to design my day in order to optimize my output the same way I would design a project. And if there's one punchline, one takeaway that I just hope that an architecture student can take from this, it's to take through creativity and the discipline that you're used to investing in your project. Let's call that design thinking. And please pull that into other areas of your life, right? The way you plan your day, the way that you're strategic about the way you network, the way that you maximize the possibilities of how you spend your time outside of studio. Like design thinking matters, right? You define what am I aiming at? Who's very good at this that I can talk to? How can I do a pinup? How can I get critics to look at my work, right? I hate it when these young students come up to me and they say, what should I do for this? I'm thinking you would never go up to your professor and say, I'm designing a project, what should I do? You would go up to them and you say, I've explored 7 options. I want your input on where you see the most potential and the most weakness. That's where you get good input. And so I'm a little bit rambling and probably sound like I'm preaching. I'll let you take back over. But ultimately, to answer your question between work and play, I think there's a wonderful combination there.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic response. I think it's going to be super helpful for students. It's kind of this idea of thoughtful hustle. So just make sure you know where you're putting your time and doing it efficiently.
Yes.
And this transitions me to think about group work, because this is something a lot of students struggle with also. But when I look at a firm like yours, I can see that it's running off teamwork. And not to say that you guys are individually useless, but all these different components running together make the business run like an engine.
Yes.
So teamwork is what is driving success. So obviously group work isn't something that is meant to be holding individuals back, but that's what kind of most students tend to think. Should be something to move you forward. Do you mind talking a little bit about the importance of teamwork at Laney LA and how you've been able to bring everyone together on that same level?
Yeah. And like, I think the more that the academic realm and the professional realm can learn from one another, the better. That's why I'm motivated to connect with guys like you. I think that one of the negative tendencies in architecture school is it tends to reward those who stand out, right? And that's just the way it is. Like if you pin up 30 students' work, right, there tends to be the most reward for the ones that appear the most different in a way. And I feel like in the profession, sometimes that's a useful tip. You need to know how to stand out appropriately. But in terms of group work, boy, I tell you, all day long, I would choose the teammate who makes the team look better than the individual look better. That's why I think I have the best 12 people you could find. And that's important. And that doesn't quite come through, right? Because at the end of the day, in architecture school, you care about your own grade. You don't technically care about your colleague's grade, right? So there's a little bit of friction there. But if you're able to leave a reputation among the 100, let's say, architecture students that you're in school with, that is the real value, right? A reputation is worth more than silver or gold, right? To quote the Old Testament. So like, yes, teamwork matters. And I feel like one of the commitments that makes us different than other firms that we compete against is when a client interviews me and says, why should I hire you guys, right? They will often see that we're doing a lot of projects and they'll say, Anthony, what is your personal involvement? You better be involved and not just hand me off to someone. And I say, with your permission, I'd like to explain how our business model might be different than you expect. And I'll say, when I launched the company, I was a one-man band. I was a two-man band with my wife. I did everything. Right now, I'm a conductor, right? I've got many people playing different instruments. And so if you're asking me to play every role in your project, I am not the right fit for you. But if you want to hire us because we have mastered a creative process that guarantees client delight, then you need to let us work the way we're working. And I'm going to introduce you to multiple personalities who do what they do in order to create this gorgeous outcome and a delightful process. That's how it works. So they say, okay, well, what's your role? And I said, my number one role is unblocking my team. They don't know what that means, so I usually don't say it. What I tell them I do is, and I believe this is true, is I make sure that the premise of the project is appropriate. In other words, the things that my designers are focusing on is the most meaningful thing. I do not design our projects. That's a little bit embarrassing to say. It's not the most attractive marketing slogan. I prepare an environment so that our designers can do their best work. And I just know that is very different than how a lot of firms operate, where the guys at the top, the guys and gals at the top do the sketches and they trickle it down. That's just not how we work.
Man, as you're talking, I've got so many questions popping up, but I know if I ask every single one of them, I'll just go so off topic and run out of time. So I'll try to stay on track.
All right. Keep me on track.
You have some really, really good points there. So I'm definitely going to be going back over this as well. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned something about being high tech and high touch. Can you explain what you mean by this?
Yeah. So the high tech is just a label for the way that we use building information modeling. We use ArchiCAD in order to really try to give as much value to our clients as possible. So we don't like design in Rhino or SketchUp and then move over to ArchiCAD. Everything goes through ArchiCAD, 3D printing, virtual reality, even the way that we leverage a lot of little apps in order to heighten the experience, 3D scanning and stuff like that. All of that is part of our value proposition. That's high tech. When I mean high touch, I mean like old-fashioned customer service. Like when our clients call, we're going to pick up. Meaning we do not send mass emails to our clients. Dear client, due to the COVID-19, I want you to know the messages I just pick them up. I say, hey, Bob, can I tell you what's on my mind? And can I ask you how you're doing? Like we go a high touch route. All of my designers and project managers have a scorecard. We review it every week. That means this is how we measure whether they're being successful. One of the scorecard metrics is, have you touched your client this week? That means there will never be a 7-day period where the architect does not proactively reach out to the client and say, how are you? This is what we're working on. This is what we need from you, right? Sometimes when we're in the early design phase, that's natural. We're just having a lot of meetings. But imagine being in, the engineering phases and there's not a reason to reach out. I still want to keep them warm. I want them to know that we're thinking and working on their behalf. So that's the high touch part.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you reckon there's a way to bring this back to make it relevant for students, this idea of high tech and high touch?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, in a way, in school, you don't have a client, right? And that's appropriate. You get to play that role yourself. But I think that the emotional intelligence that you develop in listening to, okay, what makes that professor tick? Like when I see him light up when he sees certain projects and kind of get confused when he sees others, or when I see students congregate around certain students' projects and kind of forget others, like, why is that? What makes people light up when it comes to design? To be able to first recognize it, label it, and then leverage that, I think is important. And those are all the skill sets that I think makes a good project manager. These are folks, these are unicorns. You have to be so good at design and so tactful with people. That's a hard thing to do. Maybe one day we'll be big enough where we just have our designers and we just have our account managers, right? Our people. But right now, we're small enough that we need those people to be together. And so as it relates to your architectural journey, I would just don't disregard the opinions of others. Yes, you need to follow your own conviction as it relates to developing a design language, but the ability to listen well to the opinion of others and let that improve your game, I think is going to become massively important if you end up working within the field.
Obviously, there's an importance of technology in your practice. And so I just want to kind of dig into what are some of the technological things you do, or some of the software you guys use that help you stand out from those more traditional firms?
Right. Yep. So in a way, I think because our audience is architecture students, they're not going to be impressed by my list. And so I actually think it's fairly simple to be high tech. It's fairly simple to be high touch. I think it's a little unusual to bring them together, right? So, there tend to be the more avant-garde designers who are leveraging the best augmented reality and the best 3D printing, but are they doing it in a way that is very digestible to a client? That's the gap I think my firm is filling, at least in our sector, in our industry. So, what are the technologies we use? We just try to maximize the use of ArchiCAD, right? So when we have client meetings, we are not, one of the things that drives me crazy about architecture school is like, you use Rhino to design these projects and then you go into Illustrator to like make all the line weights good. If you can use a BIM software, you just get rid of that step. Like parametrically make your objects look the way you want them to look. And yes, there's like a J-shaped learning curve. You go through a trough where feels like you're going backwards at first, but then the next semester you're even stronger. The next semester you're even stronger. So I like to remind my team, and I hope to remind your students that the only game that matters is the long game. I don't care about losing the short game. I want the long game, right? And so it's often these software packages that require the most steep learning curve that really have the biggest payoff. Most of it comes down to trying to leverage building information technology well. We do not spend time. I remember in architecture school, you'd spend let's say you have 1 week for a project. You probably spend about 70% designing and then 30% in production mode. And I just think that's a 30% that's wasted. I'd rather design more. And so most of our client meetings are literally spinning the 3D model, right? We're designing right up to the time. And we say, okay, what's the first view I want to know where we're starting. And the clients come in, we just keep designing. My clients shouldn't be paying me to go into presentation mode. Now, I know that presentation boards matter. I care about typography. I care about graphic design, all of those things. But if I can create a system that kind of solves that from the beginning, I can just spend more time designing.
Oh, something that really popped out for me then, I'm going to try to remember what it was. There was a lot of it actually, but
keep me on track.
I think the idea that you just focus on one software package is interesting, because it's like, yeah, in architecture school, you learn so many different programs and we're just thrown into so many different areas of software. Do you think it's something, is that something you recommend just for a student just to get into one maybe BIM package, whether it be Revit or ArchiCAD or something that's all inclusive? Or do you still recommend they take that journey of trying everything and then going from there?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to learn how to learn fast, especially as it comes to software packages. Most of the people we hire do not know ArchiCAD, so we have to teach them, but they have a wonderfully robust, at least 5 years of knowing how to learn software. So, when I think about the students I went through school with, who I admire the most, they were not the students who said, I'm not going to learn Maya and Rhino, I'm going to stick to Revit. Those weren't the students I looked up to, right? It also weren't the students who were like religious about it, like, 3D Max is the best and I'm gonna master that. And I'm thinking, that seems a little narrow-minded. Like, don't you want to look into a few other things as well, right? So I don't know. We call it looking for T-shaped people, meaning they know a lot about, they go broad in a shallow sense, and then they go deep where they are the most curious. So again, please be open-minded about a lot, learn a lot in architecture school, try it all, but question it, right? If your professor loves Grasshopper, use that as an opportunity to learn it. Please don't resist that. But if someone has a prejudice against a software, hear their opinion, but I wouldn't write it off. I think that productivity has kind of a negative connotation within architecture school. That's okay, right? You're not there to crank out mass amounts of multifamily housing, but I think it's also good to understand that you got to pick the right tool for the assignment you're doing. That is a timeless lesson that I'm still using today.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That is massive. Just the idea of being open-minded and experimenting with whatever's at hand, that's fantastic. Hey guys, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for making it this far through the video if you're here. There's plenty of great content to come, but I just wanted to take a pause and say, if you could, please leave a like on the video because it really does help out. And while you're there, you can hit that red subscribe button, and that way you won't miss out on future interviews like this one. So with that said, let's get back to it. So I often have students message me saying that they're coming across this kind of self-doubt or a lack of confidence that they're not going to make it in the world of architecture. Now, you and Krista left your stable jobs and were working with, as I said, very humble beginnings, quite frankly, from your home garage, which, don't get me wrong, I think is awesome. You would have come across this self-doubt, and if it really was something that you wanted to be doing, if you were really cut out to be an architect and a business owner, but obviously you've gone through that as I look at where you are today. So what tips would you have for these students that have a self-doubt about their skills or their abilities? What would you say to them?
Yeah. When I first launched our company, I experienced a massive positive thrill because suddenly I was operating on many more cylinders. So I came from a position where I was working as a project manager, loved it, got to do design, client interaction, all of that. But then when I launched my own company, I realized, oh my gosh, I also love like the business of architecture and deciding the premise of a project and entrepreneurship and finance and insurance and taxes and all these other things. And I was like, kind of like being an evangelist, like you should all be like, you should all start your own firm. It's like you get to do so much more. And then I did it for a few years and I realized, like legitimately, most people would hate my job. I'm not kidding. Most people I know would absolutely hate what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's important to talk about. Right now, entrepreneurship is very much in vogue. It's suddenly like a kind of like a badge of honor. And I'm just going to say it is not meant for everyone, Kyle. I think that, if you were a professional musician or a professional athlete, you would have to face the harsh reality that you may be the top 1% or you may never have a chance at doing that. And so my advice is less about overcoming doubt. I think doubt is sometimes, I feel like when I struggle with the imposter syndrome, I ask myself two questions. Of this sensation, what is the appropriate part that's teaching me something? I'm identifying some risk, okay? I want to learn that lesson. And what is the part that is irrational that I need to let go of? And often there's, both pieces present. But when you say, what is your advice for an architecture student struggling with self-doubt? I would say, let it teach you something, get rid of the part that's holding you back, but perhaps most importantly, learn what you are uniquely gifted at. You might have a sweet tooth for entrepreneurship, but that might not mean you should be an entrepreneur, right? It really does take a team to operate effectively. The good news is we need all sorts of individuals, and I feel like they can be radically successful in so many ways. And so if a student is looking at a big, wide architecture profession, it's natural for them to feel inadequate. Their best shot at success is to understand where they have an advantage. Some students are going to be radically technically gifted. Some students are going to be, wonderfully adept at bringing out the best in others. Some people are going to be more of a headphones on schematic designer. Others are going to be a really good wingman or support position. I just think it is to their benefit to understand what reality is in terms of their skill sets and double down on that strength.
Yeah, to understand your own skill sets. I love that. Do you mind me asking, what age were you when you started Laney LA?
27.
Wow, fairly young. Wow. And was it something you always wanted to do?
No. I honestly, I was so happy in my position. I actually had a mentor just come up to me. I was year 5 in my, year 5 out of school, year 5, and I had one job out of college. And he just said, "Hey, Anthony, I don't think you are contributing maximally in your position. I see untapped potential in you." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, I get to do these great projects. Like, I got a good team. I like my boss. I like my coworkers, blah, blah, blah." And, he basically said, "I think that you are built to build something bigger than just a home. I think you're built to build a studio." And he just planted that seed and challenged me. I can tell you more about my next step. So basically there was a 6-month process of planning to jump before the jump. And yeah, that's my answer to your question. Like, did I always know? Not really. I knew I wanted to be an architect. I got my license. But I didn't quite have like a grand plan.
Do you ever wish you did it sooner though?
That's a great question. So here in California, it does take, when I did it, it took 8 exams and something like 7,000 hours to get licensed. And that took me, I think, 3 years to do. So I probably could have done it a little bit sooner. And I definitely don't think I did it too late. When I was about to launch, I spoke with a lot of people who said, like, kind of this catch-22 where they're like, you don't have enough experience to do it now, but if you wait, it's going to be a lot harder to make the transition. So, I was like, you're telling me I'm too old and too young. I must be the I don't know. I haven't spent much time thinking retroactively. Should I have done it earlier? But it's probably possible.
And what do you think were some of the biggest differences from working as an architect for someone else, or as a project manager in your case, compared to running your own show? What were some of the biggest differences?
I went from having one boss to having a lot more than one boss.
That's something that is going to be hard to comprehend for a lot of people. Can you explain that?
You're a good interviewer. It meant that, life was simple when I was a project manager. I needed to keep my coworkers, my supervisor, my clients happy. And in a way, it's still that way. But, I didn't have to worry about sales, marketing, revenue, branding, vision, mission, strategy, insurance, administration, finance, legal, all that thing. I just didn't have to worry about all that stuff, right? I think that I was wired to appreciate the diversity of my job. That's just the way that I'm wired. I think a lot of people are built to appreciate mastery. I really enjoy trailblazing. I like doing things for the first time. I'm just making what I think is an objective statement. It's my opinion, though. I think most people don't like doing things for the first time, right? And so in that way, I'm blessed that I found a career that allows me to do a lot for the first time, right? One of our core values is the rookie's advantage, right? What advantage do I have to compensate for the 1,000 disadvantages I have when it comes to shopping for insurance when other people have been doing it for 20 years, right? I like that question. I like that challenge. I'm incredibly competitive. And so, I'm sorry, I keep going too far off topic.
I love it. This is great.
but I'm going to let you rescue me again.
Okay, cool. No, I do love this though. This is awesome. So I want to know how you began your journey of starting your own thing. I know I'm getting more into the entrepreneurship side of things, but did you begin finding clients while still in the security of your own job, while working for someone else, and it gradually built up over time to the point where you could leave your job and still have an income? Or did you just drop everything and put it all on the line and go from there?
Yeah, there was, I believe, I think it was like a 4 to 6 month transition period. My employment agreement at the time prohibited moonlighting. Okay. And I just, I know that people have different opinions on the ethical boundaries there. I chose to speak to my boss and let him know my intentions and get his permission to go part-time. I don't know how sensitive of a topic this is, but basically I got his permission to begin doing side work. I worked part-time for him rather than full-time. He was aware of what I was doing, aware of my intentions to transition. And I was then responsible for basically hiring and training a couple replacements, right? And so I think what I've learned is it's very important to do your best not to burn bridges because the world is getting smaller every day. So I did not have a long list of clients. There was still plenty of risk there. At the end of the day, though, it was my personal world view that, okay, if I fail at this, I've got marketable skill sets. I could go get another job, right? Like at the end of the day, I don't mind living humbly, and failure was not devastating. So I kind of swallowed the worst case scenario and decided that, somewhat of a clean transition is most honorable for my employer, and just decided to go for it. Hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on, I want to talk about Instagram for architects. I recently had the question of how architects can use social media. And so I thought I'd save it for this interview because obviously I'm not an architect, so I can't really have that authority to answer that. But you've been using Instagram for a while now, and you're getting quite good at it. I've been watching all the live streams and all the posts you've been doing for years now, and it really is an awesome resource for architecture students. So that's a plug there. If you guys are on your phones or something, go follow Laney LA. There's heaps of great content there. So what is the purpose, I guess, behind posting on Instagram? Is it more a business motive to get clients, or is it a way to showcase your work, or just a bit of fun?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I'll share some things, some of which are not going to be surprising, some of which might be. I aspire, this is just personally, not only to do good work, but part of the thing that gets me motivated is I do want to have a dent on my industry. I want to steer the architectural dialogue in Los Angeles a certain way. And so therefore, I care not only about the projects we publish, but the story that we tell. Let's say the influence that we have. If I were able to dream, it would be that we would have an influence on our profession. And so that's where I think doing lectures and podcasts and like connecting with people more than my staff and my clients are important. So that's one belief. Why do I do Instagram? One is I use it as a source of inspiration. I love following some of the teams that let me in behind the curtain. I just think that's a privilege. I think it's interesting. I'm personally curious about that. Am I primarily trying to get clients? No, I'm not. Have we gotten clients? We've gotten amazing clients from Instagram. If I had to choose what is the number one audience I care about the most, it's actually my staff of 12, right? Everyone who has a job, whether they're going to admit it or not, they care about the way that their reputation is influenced by their employer, right? And so I just want to make my coworkers proud. I just want them, like, how cool is it when one of our teammates designs a project, renders a project, presents it to a client, the client loves it, but then I show it to the world and the world loves it.
Yeah.
Like, how good do you feel about that? Like, that is a bolt, it's a really cool. And so that's what I care about the most. Thankfully, that narrative is not at odds with attracting clients and meeting cool friends online and all these other things. I think it's all in the same line, but if I had to pick a demographic I care about the most, it's retaining the talent I care about, because reputation matters. And secondly, I would say it's actually talent acquisition. At least 4 weeks ago, it was a very competitive market to find talented designers, right? They had a lot of options. And one of my strategies for differentiation is, if I'm on their radar, that helps, right? If they have a positive impression about the agenda that we have in terms of design, then that's going to be a slight advantage that we have over the bigger companies who might have more projects.
That's surprising. Wow, that was awesome. Is there a way that you think architecture students can leverage social media or Instagram specifically?
100%.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. So we get flooded with applications, probably like most firms.
Yep.
Like, I can't, I work so much, and the pace of my days are just lightning speed. So when I get an application, like let's say I get a 5 megabyte portfolio that has 18 pages. I'm literally like, click, 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 click. Like, I'm just lightning speed. I glance for 5 seconds over their cover letter. But if they have an Instagram link, because the format is so standard, it actually, I'm not going to get lost, right? I don't need to wonder how long is this portfolio, or did they put their best work for, I want to get an impression. Like, is there a face there? Is there a style there? Is there an approach there? Now, I know on social media, that is not reality. I get that. And I know that personal branding is going through a dip at the moment rather than a high at the moment. But again, reputation matters. I'm curious to know who you really are. And so how can an architecture student, if Instagram wasn't around as much when I was in school, but I would say post your work and post it in a way that considers the audience rather than you, right? Like, what do you want your audience to learn and feel? What do you want them to know, feel, and do? Like, just ask yourself that. And so posting, I think, your work on Instagram is a great idea. A lot of employers are going to look it up anyways. A few years ago, there used to just be caution, like, be careful what you post online because your future employer might see it. Fine. But wouldn't it be cool if you got a job that actually embraced your whole self? Like, I don't know. I just think leverage it, because reputation matters and you can help build a reputation.
Yeah. And I think if you are applying, say if someone was applying for Laney LA, which is one of these younger firms where the owner is using Instagram, then obviously you're going to want to be on Instagram as well, because that's the first thing he's going to check. So I guess it's looking at your target as well. And if you're going to go apply at a traditional firm, they still might look at your Instagram as well, but maybe you can tailor it towards more of a professional approach then, or if you're going to a younger firm, maybe you can tailor it to a more fun and young approach.
Yeah, firms come in all shapes and sizes, and architecture students come in all shapes and sizes. And so don't try to fit yourself in a box that you're not meant for, right? Like if you want the buttoned up corporate experience, great. Some people love that. Go for that. But you probably, without trying, if you're meant for that, will attract that. But I like your point. Tailor your application to the firm you're trying to attract. I just think that's wise.
This is getting more into getting a job now. This is good. This is a good transition. The biggest thing I think architecture wants to know is how to get a job, or actually getting a job. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, there was a recent graduate wanting to get hired at Laney LA. Yeah. What would they need to do to stand out from other graduates? And what are you specifically looking for when hiring?
The good news is it's not hard to stand out because the bar is like ridiculously low. And I'll tell you what I mean. Like, we put out so much content around our core values, around our projects, around even our coworkers, that it is not difficult to craft an application that is more meaningful. I get applications all the time that says like, Dear Frank, Gary, and Partners, right? And I'm like, okay, you messed up on your cover letter. Like, clearly, you reached out to everyone, and but
do you just ignore those generic ones straight away, or?
Yeah, I ignore most of them. I just, like anything, like if you're trying to attract a date or a friend or a client, like, consider who it is that's on the other side. We're not meant for everyone. They are not meant for us. If someone really resonates with what we're doing, I would challenge them, like, put words to that. Why are you applying? And what is it that you think you see that is also meaningful to you? Okay, so that's one thing. Maybe the most important thing is, this might sound a little bit cold and corporate, but dear student who's applying, how can you bring value to my firm? Honestly, that's the only thing I'm interested in. How can you bring value? And so I'll let you in on a tip. When students apply, if their first application isn't utter trash, they will get the invitation to do a 15-minute screening phone interview. Okay. And in that interview, we will ask 5 simple questions, and they could either botch the answers or they can do a beautiful job. I'm going to let you in on 2 of the questions we answer. The first is, no surprise, what is it that you are absolutely incredible at doing? In other words, that's kind of like a polite way of me saying, what skill set do you have that I can leverage, right? And if a student says, oh, I'm good at teamwork and design, right? I'm going to think next, right? But if they say that I have mastered every software I've ever used, and let me tell you 2 examples of the way that I was brought into other firms that thought they were mastering these, and I changed their workflow, then you got my attention. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm also going to say, what are you not good at or not interested in doing? And if they say, I guess I'm not good, I work too hard, right? It's next. But if they say, well, let me tell you the truth. I am not the person you want to put in front of a client. I'm the person you want behind the laptop, right? Doing schematic designs that I can hand off to a showman, right? That shows insight and personal awareness, right? It's basically, what is your area of strength and what is your area of stretch? I need people who know who they are in that sense. And so, I don't know, my advice is get clear on that. To do that, you got to try a lot of things. You got to get feedback from people you trust. But once you get clear on that, all you got to do is find the team who values what you can bring.
When you got your first job and you were only at the one firm, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Did you do some shopping around first, and were you specific on where you wanted to work, or did you just take the first job that you were offered, or how did you go about that?
Yeah, so I worked all throughout my 5-year undergraduate education, so I got to touch a lot of firms there. I did a kind of like a SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. I applied many places. I picked the spot for the number one parameter was, where did I consider the greatest mentorship opportunity. So I ended up picking a firm that that I had deep respect for the founder and the rest of the staff, and where I saw that they seemed to have a culture of true mentorship, right? So that was one of my deciding factors. I also needed to look at the type of work, the location, all these other things. And yes, there were like high points and compromises all along the way. And none of us have a crystal ball, but it was, where did I see the opportunity for true mentorship? That's what mattered to me at the time.
That's good. So this one's for all the architecture students that have asked this to me on Instagram or on my emails. Just constantly get this question. If you could go back in time to when you first started studying to become an architect, is there anything you wish you could have changed or wish you'd known or done sooner or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that it's very unlikely that someone will go through architecture school and underinvest in their studio work, right? The whole system is meant to prioritize appropriately the investment of time and energy and dollars into your studio work. It's a brilliant thing. It's a special thing. If I could go back in time, I would have been more intentional about the relationships. I would have started a CRM, like a client relation management database for the hundreds of people I met, right? Professors and critics and students and all these people. I wish I would have started to systematize those relationships, not in a cold-hearted, merchant way, but just saying, I'm going to forget. Like I'm going to lose touch with these folks. And these are people who are going to have an impact on their own social circles and industries. And I just wish I would have lifted my head up a little bit more from my desk and connected with those people, because at the end of the day, the strength of your network really, really matters. Just to give an example, when I launched my practice, I would literally have a quota for the number of people I would reach out to, often on LinkedIn, former professors and classmates saying, "Dear professor, I hope you remember me from studio. I'm just letting you know I've launched my own practice. So if you need anyone who blah, 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 blah." Now, the success or failure of that person wanting to help me is based entirely on the way I treated them like 7 years ago, right? And so I did a great job treating them really well 7 years ago, but I said nothing to them in the last 7 years. That was my failure. Once a year, I should have said, "I just want to reach out. Thank you for the influence you had. I'm doing great. I'm at this firm. Happy New Year." I should have done that.
A light bulb just went off in my head when you said that. That's probably the most actionable thing you can take away from this interview. Just keep a record of those people that you've been learning from or the people that have been important in your architecture journey, and just reach out to them and let them know you're still alive and ask how they're doing, really. I think that's awesome. I just want to quickly touch on, earlier you mentioned that you had a mentor while still working, and then also a mentor that transitioned you into doing your own thing. Could you tell us a bit about that mentor and where you met them, how they came a part of your journey?
Yeah, so I don't know if you've heard me kind of talk about this topic other spots, but it comes up a lot. I think that is one of the most underutilized resources, at least in the students that I interact with.
Yeah.
There's so many things I want to get good at. And all I do is I say, who's the best at that thing? Make a list of those people. And I'm going to convince or pay or trade with one of them to enable me to get better than I am, right? What is the definition of a coach? A coach is meant to take a player farther than they can go on their own. Okay. So I want to surround myself with coaches. So I literally have the life habit. I've had this habit for years of just identifying, okay, that person is good at scaling an architecture company. Do you mind if I pay you $350 a week to have a 1 hour phone call with me? Why not? No worries, man. Mad respect. Next, I'm going to find someone who can do that. So, get a mentor. You have to do it. You asked about my early mentor. So this was, a family friend who I knew from my church. He happened to be an entrepreneur. We knew each other a little bit, and our relationship became much stronger when he first told me, Anthony, you're not running all cylinders, and then it would basically give me assignments to help me prepare to launch a company. So you can imagine, Kyle, if you were to say, all right, young architect, go launch a website, that person is going to overthink it. So he would say, I want you to build a website in 24 hours, go, right? So then I would do it. He would say, I want you not to write a business plan. I want you to write a risk mitigation plan. I say, what's that? He says, make a list of the top 10 things that can go wrong when you launch. Okay. 1 sentence, 10 things. Then I want you to write 1 paragraph of a simple plan of what you will do when that bad thing happens. There's your risk mitigation plan. So on that was things like, my marriage is stressed because my wife thinks I'm working too much. Bullet point. Okay. When that happens, what will I do? So he would just give me these assignments. And because I didn't want to disappoint him, I would take the assignments very seriously. And I ended up just making radical progress on all these fronts. And so that happened to be his influence in the formative years of our launch. And since then, I've just developed the habit of like trying to surround myself with mentors.
That's awesome. I think I've been trying to find, I guess, someone like that to help me with architecture. And it's not that I've tried super hard to go out and specifically find someone to mentor me, which is something I really want to do now after you mentioned that. But where do you think a student would start to find someone who can help them progress? I guess working in a firm is definitely, you're going to surround yourself with those people that can mentor you if it's in the right firm. But what's a good starting place for going out and networking and finding the right people to mentor you?
Yep. So I think the first step is to identify what is the gap you're trying to fill, or what is the skill set that you're trying to close, right? For some people, it might be just advice on how to excel as an employee. For some people, it might be coaching on how to apply for and filter different job opportunities. But I would be explicit with that, because if you come up to someone and say, will you mentor me? That's a scary, creepy question. If you go up to them and say, dear professional, I admire these 3 things about you. And I'm about to enter a season of my life where I see a gap between what I know and what I think I need to know to be successful. I think that gap is my ability to know which firms are a good fit for me. I've made a list of 15. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to invest some time in helping me understand the insights that would rank these firms. Would you be willing to do that? Like, that's a question that could be answered as opposed to, will you mentor me? So that's my advice. In terms of where do you find them? I mean, I think it's okay to start with your own network. So you can go to your, I don't know, let's say your uncle and say, I'm looking for someone to help me answer this question. Is there anyone you can introduce me to? I have my personality is what's called quick start. So it's very easy for me to kind of make decisions. Most people I meet have to do a lot of research and kind of ramp themselves up emotionally. When they say it's hard to find a mentor, my honest question is, have you made 50 phone calls yet? And the answer is no, they haven't.
Yep. Yeah, that's brilliant. It's that idea of consciously networking, consciously knowing who you want to be networking with to be able to build that relationship and then build that over time. That's awesome. All right, we are getting towards the end of the interview and I have been really enjoying this, but where can someone find out more about you and more about Laney LA and everything you guys do?
Okay, yeah. I mean, Instagram, I think, is where you and I connected. And so it's Laney LA Inc. So give us a hello there. Our website is laney.la. And, we try to keep that fresh. Those are probably the 2 best spots. Yeah, I mean, it's fun to be connected. I really do care about this community and this industry. And so, folks reaching out to say hello is certainly a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Awesome. And I'll definitely link to all that in the description below. So if you're watching this, definitely go follow Laney LA. That's a no-brainer. Go follow Laney LA Inc. on Instagram. And I want to ask one final question before we part, just to get everyone thinking. Bit of an open-ended question, but what do you think is the one thing that would make an architecture student successful? And you can go wherever you want with this, but I'll leave that with you.
Wow. Okay. Great question. Right. So obviously that depends on an individual's definition of success.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just going to go with the first thing that comes to mind. I'm not going to overthink it, but I think when I think of success, I think of like contribution, right? What lives can I impact in the long term? Again, at the end of the day, the portfolio, it matters. Your studio projects matter, but the way that you impact your classmates is probably the thing that I would care about the most. Like, are you someone who brings out the best in others, who points them to things that truly matter? In my relationship with my wife, it really began with two young people in stressful situations, kind of on the verge of a little bit of a meltdown, right? And so that's where the friendship started. Like, we were both personally challenged by the overwhelm of being, given these big assignments, not knowing the software, not knowing how to do a diagram, not knowing how to do research, and we're just stressed out. And that's where companionship becomes almost, a life essential thing. And so to me, success is like impact and contribution. And so I would just encourage folks, even though architecture school, I think, is designed to give you a little bit of tunnel vision, which can be helpful, look outside of that and think, what are the lives around me that I can touch? I happen to believe that every person possesses an eternal soul, and therefore impacting a person is far more valuable than a building that might last 100 years. So that's my little 2 cents. I appreciate the question, and I think you're asking the right ones.
Wonderful. Well, Anthony, thank you so much. It's been an absolute just mind-blowing experience for me, because I've got so many actionable things I can take away now, but I'm sure a lot of students will be appreciating this interview. So what you're doing is awesome, especially with the Instagram lives and just you sharing all your knowledge with everyone. I think it's awesome. So really appreciate you coming on the show and spending the time with us. I know you're really busy as well. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Kyle. So happy to be here. Glad to be a guest. We're definitely rooting for you and wishing you and your audience the very, very best.
Wow, thank you very much. All right, take care, Anthony. I don't know about you guys, but that was one of the most useful conversations I've ever had. I just want to say thank you so much for making it all the way through the video. If you're still here, you're a true champion. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to help out. You can leave them in the comments below. I just love how passionate Anthony was in that interview and how he really does have a passion for helping others and leaving a positive dent in the world of architecture. So if you guys want to learn more about Anthony, you can do so by going to his Instagram page at Laney LA Inc. or go visit the website laney.la. So once again, thank you so much, Anthony, for the great conversation, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of the Successful Archi Students Podcast.